I thought we talked about this. I really did. I was like, oh, didn't we already make a video about that? Why do we need to talk about it again? But then I kind of looked through the archives and I saw the videos that we did make, and yeah, I'm not really too sure we talked about this. So, for the sake of going over everything, that's kind of what I wanted to dive into here today. It's everything. We might have ourselves some extra thoughts about the Vancouver Canucks and J.T. Miller. Because while it has been reported by different insiders, the Saravelis, the Friedmans, and even guys like Nick Kypreos, we've talked about all of this on the YouTube channel, by the way, over the past few days. While these guys have spoken out about Miller, there was one comment that Kypreos made on the Friday edition of Real Kipper and Born that I missed. And I wanted to revisit it here in this particular video, just diving into the possibilities and just going off on some sort of a personal tangent as to what this could really mean. Because on the January 2nd edition of Kipper and Born, Matthew's Questions, Team Canada Dissection, and Canucks Chaos, you had Nick Kypreos on the program go out there and say this, that JT Miller, in Kypreos' opinion, has one destination that he would waive his no-move clause to make a trade for, and that's the New York Rangers. Kipper then talks about the return of Mika Zibanejad and K'Andre Miller for JT Miller. And that idea, Miller for Miller, has been something we have discussed here on this channel as well. We've dived into almost every hypothetical trade idea that people have been tossing out there in the media, written journalism, radio, elsewhere, but when it comes to the idea that JT would waive his no-move clause for one destination, and just one, that's the phrasing that Nick Kypreos uses, there is one spot that Miller would waive to, and it is the New York Rangers. Kypreos prefaces that entire conversation by saying he's getting the impression that Miller doesn't want to go anywhere. And that aligns with some of the other talk we've had with different insiders. Friedman going out there speaking, Dhaliwal said some stuff I'm pretty sure too. Miller and his family, they are committed to Vancouver and they like it here. But if the Canucks management were to present some sort of a trade opportunity, a trade idea, just floating some things around with Miller, it's not necessarily like he would pull the old Louis Eriksson and be like, yeah, no, sorry, I'm not getting traded. I'm staying here forever, guys. Sorry. And that ultimately seems to be ignited by this Kypreos talk, that Miller would accept a trade to New York in particular. Honestly, it's giving more Kessler vibes than I was anticipating, because if you remember that situation from over a decade ago, Kessler wanted only to go to Pittsburgh, Anaheim, or Chicago because those were the competitive teams at the time, which forced Jim Benning to make the trade with Anaheim, which landed the Canucks Lucas Pisa, Nick Bonino, and the first-round pick that inevitably became Jared McCann. Yeah, talk about tangents, eh? I'm kind of a master of doing that, especially with mid-2000s Canucks ideas. But anyways, JT Miller being willing to waive his no-move clause to New York is interesting when you consider the fact that the Rangers and their beat have been so interested in this guy too. Not only is Larry Brooks going out there and writing every other article about how he would have wanted Miller to get traded back to New York a long time ago, but you have folks around the Rangers, Friedman going out there and saying stuff, oh, the Rangers are interested, they want him, he's the kind of guy that they would need, they'd use him well, his locker room presence, his domineering personality would be welcomed in New York. It's kind of the personality they need in that room, etc., etc., etc. Lots going on here with JT Miller and the ideas tossed around with the Rangers. But ultimately, it does make sense. Because when you consider Miller as a human being, like, I don't want to get too deep into his own personal life because, it's not really anybody's business, but he does have a very documented happy family here in Vancouver, and moving from place to place, going all over the place definitely does take a toll on your folks, which is why, it's interesting, but you have to look at other players who have families around the league. Like the one that comes to my mind right away, Vladimir Tarasenko. He's got a wife, he's got kids, and he went from St. Louis to New York to Ottawa to Florida to Detroit, all in the span of like 2-3 years. That's a lot to go for if you've got a family that sticks with you every step of the way. Now, some families do the split dad going away and playing hockey thing on the road pretty well, but at the same time, there is a very distinct idea that says, hey, like, if you've got kids, you don't really want to be up and moving all the time. It's just kind of inconvenient for everybody that you care about. So for Miller to have a list of maybe only one or maybe two teams that he'd accept a trade to, New York being the primary target, yeah, okay, I guess the Big Apple makes sense. He's got familiarity there. Of course, he was drafted by the Rangers back in 2011, I think? Yeah, that was kind of before my time in terms of being able to pay attention to prospects and everything. But initially a New York draftee, he had spent a few years in that organization. He was traded to Tampa in 2017-2018, so there was a pretty reasonable sample of development, production, and familiarity that New York had with JT. And I'm just going to go out there and take a stab that maybe if JT gets traded to a team like New York, he becomes a top-tier player, like a really top-of-the-line guy. If he gets sent over to another team that he was a part of, like Tampa Bay, for example, he wouldn't really become a top player there. They wouldn't use him more than a Braden Point or a Kucherov or a Brandon Hagel, for example. I get they're all different positions, but you would understand the hierarchy of tiers in the team. If you send him over to New York, a team that really does need that spark, yeah, okay, he's all of a sudden being the most important player above Zibanejad, above Kreider, maybe even rivaling Artemi Panarin there, just because of the personality attached to it. JT would honestly be like setting himself up to be the savior in New York if he does get sent over to the Rangers, just based off of the way everybody in that beat is talking about him. Don't let Rangers fans know that JT becomes really bad defensively when he's out of it, and when he lacks that drive to continue to persist, that's when he becomes a negative to your team. Don't let Rangers fans hear that, folks. Just think about all the times he swears at his teammates and he yells at people. Just think about the good. But anyways, the idea of Miller getting traded over to New York has definitely not been new, and I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. How do you feel about this entire conversation? Do you think there would be other destinations that this dude would be interested in potentially waiving his no move clause to? Friedman went out there and speculated about Chicago, which is why we talked about that yesterday, you know? Like, I fantasized about this back in Chicago. Mercy, mercy me, mercy Alagro. But the comment section is your floor. Do you think there are any other guys that would make a Rangers-Miller trade work positively for Vancouver? We had discussed K'Andre Miller, Lafreniere, a bunch of other dudes. Obviously, like the top tier guys. I mean, Mika Zibanejad, I don't really have any interest in him coming to Vancouver at all, considering his struggles this season. It's kind of weird, right? Because just a few hours ago, we made a video talking about Noah Dobson, and I was like, yeah, no, that guy's got struggles, but he's fine. But now for Mika Zibanejad, it's like, yeah, that guy's got struggles. I don't want him. You talk about the dichotomy of hockey fans, right? Maybe I'm just really biased towards right-handed defensemen instead of setters. But anyways, let me know your thoughts in the comments section below about the idea of Miller waiving for New York. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.